Hello and welcome to Barbara's podcast. This is the show for women, all about health, nutrition, and wellness. It's the show that will empower you and inspire you to create a healthier lifestyle.
Well, hello and welcome. I'm Barbara Karafokas, and with me is my special guest, Terry Tucker. So welcome, Terry.
Well, thank you, Barbara. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Excellent. So am I. Terry, please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, what you do.
Sure. So I live in Denver, Colorado, in the United States. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this is long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, which is a fast food company, in their marketing department. Unfortunately, I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out in marketing with a fast food company, then became a hospital administrator. And then I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of that job was I was a SWAT team hostage or crisis negotiator. After my law enforcement career, I started my own school security consulting business. I coached girls high school basketball, but for the last 10, almost 11 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for almost 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military here in the U.S., the Space Force.
Oh my goodness, that's impressive.
Yeah, I'm old, so I have a long resume.
Yeah. So as a cancer survivor, would you like to share that experience with our listeners? I know that it was, you were a lot of pain and agony and, the mental techniques you used to cope with that as well.
Sure. So back in 2012, I was a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas here in the U.S. when I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And initially, I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received the call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have a rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, and it affects the melanin, the pigment in our skin. But this is a rare form that has nothing to do with sun exposure that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. As a result, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center here in the US. They cut out the tumor on the bottom of my foot. They took out all the lymph nodes in my groin. And unfortunately, at the time, melanoma was a death sentence. They didn't really have anything to treat it. And so they put me on a drug called interferon to help keep it from coming back. The side effects of the interferon were that I had severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And that was not a cure. That was, as my oncologist used to say, we're trying to kick the can down the road. After 5 years of interferon, it became too toxic to my body. I had to stop it. Cancer came back in the exact same place. 2018, I had my left foot amputated. 2020, right during the middle of the COVID pandemic, I had my left leg amputated, and I still have tumors in my lungs, which I am now treated for every 3 weeks. And I know that sounds like an ugly journey, and it certainly has been. But I can tell you this: number one, I don't think you know yourself until you've been tested by some form of adversity. And number two, I think cancer has made me a better human being.
Oh, that's certainly an inspiring story, and certainly full of courage. You know, the courage that you need to be able to withstand that as well. Um, have you tried any working with diets with regards to the cancer?
I have one of the diagnostic tools that my doctor used to use to check for the tumors and where they were, and that was what was called a PET scan. And the PET scan was basically injecting you with radioactive sugar. And
Okay.
the idea being that cancer cells have a higher metabolism, and so they'll pick up that sugar at a much faster rate, and they will glow on the scan. So I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but I kind of figured, well, sugar probably shouldn't be something that I eat very often. And certainly here in the United States, with all the processed foods we have and things like that, sugar is in everything. But I try to stay away from sugar. I don't eat breads. I don't eat sweets. I don't eat things that contain sugar. I try to eat proteins. I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and things like that. I don't drink alcohol. I don't drink soda and things like that. So I stick with water. So yes, my diet is very important for me. One, to feel good, and also to keep as much ammunition away from the cancer to help it grow.
Definitely, definitely. So feeling poorly and in a great deal of agony, how did you deal with that? And for so long?
Yeah, I dealt with it through what I call my four truths. And I've really, they're not mine. I don't think you can own a truth. I mean, I haven't copyrighted them or anything like that. I think truths are more eternal, but they're things that I refer to as sort of the bedrock of my soul. They're just a good place to start to build a quality life off of. And I'll give them to you. I have them here on a Post-it note in my office. So I see them multiple times during the day, and they constantly get reinforced in my brain. So the first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The third one I look at is more of a legacy type of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one I look at is, no, that's okay. The fourth one I look at is pretty self-explanatory. It's, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated.
Oh, incredible. I think those are very inspiring, and something that people can actually use to keep them going and empowering. We all go through these difficult times, and especially with having gone through the pandemic and COVID, a lot of things have happened to many people. So it's something they could actually use and apply and think about, having gone through or still going through adversity.
Oh, absolutely. And I think people always ask me, is there one truth that's more important than the other or anything like that? And I used to say, no, I think they're all equally important. But as I've sort of developed these and thought about them and read more and things like that, I really think the first one about controlling our minds and the things that we put into our thoughts. We all, like it or not, whether we would admit it or not, we all talk to ourselves, and I always caution people to make sure that talk is positive, because we all become what we think. So if you're, doing something or you're involved in something, like I mentioned, I was a basketball player for a number of years. If I were to take a basketball and go out onto the court and shoot baskets, there would be a certain part of my brain that would light up. But that same part of my brain would light up if I thought about going out on the court and shooting those shots as well. So, if you're telling yourself all kinds of negative stuff that, I can't do this, I'm not good at this and things like that, eventually you're going to hardwire your brain to the point where you're right. You can't do those things. You're not good at those because you hardwired your brain to say that, yeah, I'm not good at algebra, or I'm not good at writing, or I'm not, whatever it is that you feel you're not good at. So be very careful how you talk to yourself, and try to talk to yourself in a positive, motivating, uplifting way. And again, we're human beings. We're going to have negative thoughts. We're going to have those things. Don't worry about it when those come into your mind, but understand that when you control the narrative, you can put whatever you want in your mind. Your mind can hold one thought at a time. Why would you want to make that a negative thought?
Negative one, yeah. Our internal dialogue is extremely important. I know that it can either be negative or positive. So the more we consciously are aware of what we tell ourselves, the better. And either you see the universe as a friendly universe or as a hostile one. It's what you perceive.
Yeah, it's what you perceive, and it's what you're looking for. If you look at, if you're looking for the universe to be hostile to you, then it's going to be hostile to you. If you're looking at it to be positive and motivating for you, then that's what it's going to be. We usually find what we're looking for.
I agree with that 100%. So you mentioned that motivation alone will not cause you to progress. In your opinion, what will?
I think it's a combination of three things. I think it starts with motivation. I look at motivation sort of like lighting the fuse to sort of that big explosion. But if all you have is motivation, that's not going to be enough, because what you need with motivation is you need discipline and you need good or healthy habits. If you don't have any one of those three things, then it's going to be incredibly hard to be successful. So if you don't have, if say I know food is big in your life, and you asked me about my diet, if I was eating, fast food, a lot of high fat things, and drinking, alcohol and soda and Coca-Cola and all that kind of stuff, well, that's a bad habit. If I was really disciplined and I was motivated, that's not going to help me in any way at all, because I'm really undermining myself. So motivation I look at as the fuse to get you going, but then you have to have good habits, and you have to have the discipline to implement those habits in your life. If you don't have the discipline, if you've got great habits, but I should probably eat well this morning, breakfast, most important meal of the day, but I'm going to eat a sugary cereal and I'm going to follow it up with a donut. Well, then that's not a good habit. You don't have the discipline to implement those habits. So I think you need all three: motivation, discipline, and good habits to make you successful in life.
Definitely. It's what I tell my clients. I call it the 3 Ds. It's discipline, determination, and dedication. So it's very similar to you, to what you've said. Can you share some tips with our listeners to help them create healthier habits and to stick with them for a lifetime? Because it's one thing, creating them, and then it's another thing sticking to them.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're absolutely right. At the beginning of every year, we make New Year's resolutions, and we want to have goals and things like that. But I think where we lack, or where we fall down, is we don't tie those New Year's resolutions, we don't tie those goals to our values.
Yes.
What's important in our life? What makes a difference for us? What are we willing to either literally or figuratively give our life for? What do we have passion for that we're willing to spend our lives doing, with the understanding that we may never be successful at it, but we love it enough, or we have a passion for it enough, that we're willing to do it. I think if you understand your values, or your values, then it's easier to make New Year's resolutions. It's easier to make goals, because you can tie those goals or those resolutions to your values. So if you don't know what your values are, if you don't know what means anything to you, if you don't know what your passion or your purpose is, then it's awful hard to make goals because you're all over the, well, that's not true. It's really easy to make goals. It's very hard to reach those goals and to keep those goals going throughout your life if you don't know what your values are. So that would be my biggest takeaway from this is understand your values, know what they are, and then tie your goals to those values. I mean, they are the things that you are. I mean, that you own. There's no wiggle room there. I mean, my family is that important to me. That's what I value. I value having good character. I value being humble. I value being motivated and positive. Those are things that for me, there's no wiggle room there. There's no, well, maybe they are. No, they are for me. They are that rock. They are a good place to anchor my goals and my resolutions to.
And what about gratitude?
Oh, I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I look at gratitude as part of being humble, of being a person that realizes that, yes, I've been battling cancer for, almost 11 years now. I've lost my foot, I've lost my leg, but I am incredibly grateful for everything that I have. I mean, I shouldn't have been here more than 5 years after my diagnosis. Now I'm almost 11 years here. Why? And when I had my leg amputated and I found out I had these tumors in my lungs, which I'm still being treated for, my doctor showed me my CAT scan from back in 2020. And I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan or anything, but I kind of know that doesn't look like it belongs there or something like that. So I looked at them. I had these big tumors in my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces of my lungs. And I looked at my doctor and I said, how was I alive? And he kind of smiled and shook his head. He said, I don't know. Which said to me, and this is another thing that I think is important that I'll pass on to you and your listeners. Another thing that's gotten me through this is what I call my 3 F's, which are faith, family, and friends. And when my doctor said, I don't know how you were alive, what that said to me was, God's not done with me yet. My purpose here on this earth is not fulfilled. So I'm going to have to deal with all this garbage of having cancer and all the treatment that goes with it, with the understanding that there's a bigger purpose for me. It's not just about the cancer. It's how can I help people have a better life? And I also, I don't want your listeners to think that I never have bad days or, that I don't get down. I do. I'm a human being. I cry. I feel sorry for myself, but I just don't let myself stay there. I know that I need to keep moving forward. And if you keep that in your mind, and again, that goes back to my values. I value the fact that I need to be motivated and I need to keep moving forward.
Okay. With the, I see that you've written a book, Sustainable Excellence. Have you shared that journey in the book?
Sustainable Excellence was really a book that was born out of 2 conversations I had. One was with a former basketball player that I had coached when we lived in Texas, who had moved to the area in Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live. And the 4 of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college who reached out to me on social media, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn to not just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. Not that those aren't important. Those are incredibly important. But I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I took some time and I was writing some notes and eventually had these kind of 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 3 to 4 month period that I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Could you share a couple of the principles with us?
Sure. Each chapter is a principle, or each principle is a chapter, however you want to look at it. And it's always fun for me as the author when somebody reaches out, because there's always one principle that particularly resonates with the reader. So it's a great place to start a conversation. And I'll give you the one, I wrote all 10 of them, but the one that resonates with me, and I'm sort of ashamed to say it resonates with me because I've done it so much, is this. And this is the title of the chapter. Most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that. I should do this. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I don't know enough, or maybe I'm not smart enough, or what will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. And I always tell, especially younger people, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. So that's one. I was a hostage negotiator on a police department SWAT team. And there's a chapter in there about listening. And we're like, well, of course, we all listen. No, we don't listen. What I'm talking about is not listening to respond, but listening to understand. So it may be, Barbara, you say something, and I'd be like, oh, okay, Barbara, I may agree with you. I may not agree with you, but help me to understand where you're coming from. Help me to understand what this means to you. And that's us connecting on a human level. And right now, I think around the world, we're just yelling at each other. We're screaming at each other. And if you don't believe what I believe, then you're bad. Well, no, you're not bad. You just differ from what I think. That doesn't mean we can't be friends. So listening there's a whole chapter in there about listening. There's also a chapter in there about failing, and failing often, especially when you're young. I think it's real important. People think that, they see people that are successful and they think, well, I want to be like that. Well, those people failed a lot to become successful. But what they did when they failed is they learned from that failure and they applied it so that they could get better, they could grow, and they could get to the point where they're successful.
And got up again and not be afraid of failure. I think many of us have this fear of failure. I mean, it even starts at school. If I say the wrong answer.
Yeah, and fear is a great motivator. Fear is like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to involve. I'm not going to engage. I'm going to disengage and just stay to myself. But we're not designed to do that. We're better when we're in a group. We're better when we connect with people. And I think the other, and I really didn't put this in the book, but I think it's kind of a theme in the book, is the importance of being a lifelong learner, of constantly, walking around with a piece of paper and a pencil so that when you hear something or see something, you write it down and you increase your knowledge, and you're always looking to learn. And we learn from other people, and we learn from the stories that we tell each other. We're great, whether we think we are or not. We're a species of great storytellers. I mean, here in the United States, the Native American people, they didn't really have a written language, but they told stories and they passed down traditions in that way. That's what we do. So, I love going to parties. I love being around people because I always ask them about themselves. How did you get here? What did you do? How did you fail? What makes you the person you are? I love asking people questions like that.
Each person has a story. Each person. That's so true. Going back to the listening, I think a lot of people also don't know how to listen, but then if they do listen in conversation, they're always, people listen as well to defend themselves and to see how they're going to come back. instead of just being open to listening and then seeing how can I actually understand that person.
Exactly. And that's a great point that you make, because a lot of times when we're engaged in a conversation, we're not listening to what the person's saying. We're formulating what we're going to say instead of listening to what they're going to say. So it's almost like, hurry up, Barbara, say what you're going to say, because I want to put my 2 cents in here. Well, that's listening to respond. That's not listening to understand. And we need to spend more time understanding each other. So we need to listen. And you know what? There'll be plenty of time for you to interject your comments, your thoughts, your beliefs, but spend some time getting to know that person and connecting with that person. I mean, that's what we did as negotiators. You know, when we were dealing with somebody in crisis or somebody who had a hostage, we're trying to make that connection. We're trying to develop, really the overarching part of it, we're trying to develop trust. Just like any relationship, you know, parent, child, husband, wife, boss, subordinate, we're trying to develop a trusting relationship with an individual that is in crisis right now to try to get them out safely.
It's definitely an important quality that we could all develop.
Absolutely.
Do you have a membership?
It's called the Sustainable Excellence Membership. It comes right from the book. So if you want more information about it, it's at sustainableexcellencemembership.com.
Okay, excellent. Because I thought, well, if people are interested to read your book or to join your membership program, it'd be nice to see where they could find it. So thank you for sharing that. In closing, would you have your last 2 cents of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience before we end our podcast?
Sure. So I recently, I'll tell you a quick story. I recently had a nurse that asked me what it was like to have my foot amputated and to have my leg amputated. And I told her, I said, it certainly has not been an easy thing for me to deal with. I'm still learning how to walk again. You know, when you're 6'8", falling is not an option. You get hurt from this height. But what I told her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Barbara. That's who all your listeners are. You know, your heart, your mind, your soul. This body is just a house or a vessel to house who we really are. Now, I'm not telling you not to go to the gym, and I'm not telling you not to eat right and, you know, and to love and learn and all that kind of stuff. But we spend a lot of time on our physical appearance, you know, and I don't think we spend as much time on our heart, our mind, and our soul. And that's who we really are. So I guess I would just leave your listeners with the idea that spend a little more time on those things that really make up the real person who you are, not the facade, not the you know, sometimes people are a little phony with how they look and act. Figure out who you really are, understand your values, and then work on those things to make you a better human being.
Well, thank you very much, Terry, for sharing with us and for coming to the podcast.
Thanks for listening to Barbara's podcast. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter or e-courses. Celebrate life, and see you at the next episode.